90s grunge music, guys. Yeah! Let's go! Let's go!
Now, before we get started, let's start things off in my favorite place, the kitchen. Now, the reason why I wanted to start things off in the kitchen today is because sometimes music genres can be a lot like cooking. Here we have cooking where you take certain ingredients to make whatever you're trying to make, as to with a music genre, it has all these different elements that make up the genre. So the question is, how do you take your grunge or alternative rock music? You can have it bleak, to where it's very dark and depressing, very moody, but also can get right in the soul. You can have it loud, very in your face, very loud, very upbeat at times, and it's just there to tell you and scream at how it is and against your own teen angst. And then, oh, here we go, slow, where it can be very melodic, very relaxing, and kind of moody, but also can sometimes have a little bit of blend of bleakness to where it's slow, moody, and very dark and depressing. Or at times it can be more light and uplifting. It just happens to be slow, moody, and melodic. Now, the bands that I'm going to be shining the light on today are going to be in this category of slow and moody and relaxing. But we're also going to add a secret little ingredient into the mix. And that secret ingredient is space. Yes, shoegaze or post-grunge or whatever you want to call this little subgenre I'm explaining today. It's just where you rock your fanny pack or your hoodie tied around your waist and you sway to the creepy but soothing guitar effects and just get moody with the music, Simpsons style. The sound of these bands are stuff like the Melvins, some of the soothing Nirvana songs such as Come As You Are or their cover of Oh Me. Hell, even CKY if you listen to that back in the day. Some Nine Inch Nails, and especially the Deftones. From what I heard of Deftone, I'm not that big into them, but if you do, these bands are right up your alley. Let's take a look on how it's doing. I think it's ready. Oh yeah! Oh yeah! I like that!
Oh, how long can trusty Cadet Stimpy hold out? How can he possibly resist the diabolical urge to push the button that could erase his very existence? Will his tortured mind give in to its uncontrollable desires? Can he withstand the temptation to push the button that even now beckons him ever closer? Will he succumb to the maddening urge to eradicate history at the mere push of a single button? Will he hold out, folks? Can he hold out? No, I can't!
That right there is a little band called Failure. Now, they dig deep into the shoegaze with their heavy effects on their guitar. I mean, just look at the amount of pedals that they had. And then on top of that, they have a singer that has a little bit of a Kurt Cobain style voice with some heavy riffs that pull you back into the grunge, just in case if you get too hypnotized or too deep into the space sound that they have. I had discovered this band roughly around 2015 or so, when a friend of mine had told me that he ended up wounding up at one of their shows. And he had never heard of them before, but apparently a friend of his had mentioned, oh yeah, they were back in the 90s and they're one of the best grunge bands you've never heard of. And my friend was so amazed by them that he was just like, how have I never heard of this band? So pretty much when he mentioned that, I was all ears. Failure was a band that started in LA around 1990 with drummer Robert Goss, bassist Greg Edwards, and lead guitarist and vocalist Ken Andrews. They were first signed in '92 and released their debut album, Comfort. The band didn't like their little involvement with the production of that album, so when they worked in their 1994 album, Magnified, Greg and Ken got more involved with the mixing and production factor. Meanwhile, drummer Goss left the band and Kelly Scott stepped in for the drummer, and this has been pretty much the main lineup ever since. Magnified was a much more improved album, having tighter constructed songs, much more involvement with the production of the album, and it actually kind of digs a little deep into a little bit of a nu metal sound. Alongside being more successful, they were actually able to do music videos for some of these songs, including the song Undone. But unfortunately, the album still didn't get their name out there, so when working on their third album, they had some contract issues, and eventually coming out with their third album, Fantastic Planet. Songs like Saturday Savior, Stuck on You, and Pitiful had actually had some radio play and got their name out there a little bit. But unfortunately, there just wasn't a whole lot of promotion for this album, and the studio had asked them to possibly work on a fourth album, which at that time Ken had felt there was less need to work on another album when they should just promote the one that they already have. Basically saying that it's a great album, if you guys push it more, maybe we'll get more attention for it. So with the lack of the studio wanting to promote the album more, and with the constant frequent drug use within the band, they had felt the need to kind of call it quits. And then they came back 16 years later. No longer being on drugs and also raising families, Ken and Greg had been in the studio and decided to work on some music together, and was wondering whether this was failure material and then that they should bring the band back together. And if I'm not mistaken, they did like a test show out in LA, and it had sold out within minutes. Failures released 2 more studio albums, The Heart is a Monster in 2015, and recently Wild Type Droid in 2021, along with the EP In the Future in 2018. And the best part about it is, even after the 16-year gap and I think 20-year gap between the albums, you can listen from the third album, Fantastic Planet, to their fourth one, and it seems timeless. Like, there is no gap whatsoever. And I think what helps with that is the fact that after the band broke up, Ken Andrews has decided to continue working on mixing music for other bands such as Paramore and Tenacious D and a couple of others. So with that ability to be able to mix and sound produce that way, I guess you could see where it was kind of easy for him to find that sound from the early days and be able to record and mix to sound almost exactly like that. But like I said, look at the amount of foot pedals that the guitarist has, and then not only that, but the sound shields that they have around the drum set. Me personally, the amount of shows that I've seen live, I don't really see sound shields around the drummer. So that only proves that this band was one of the best sounding bands I've heard live. I mean, it had almost sounded exactly like what it did off the album, seeing it live. And recording it live does probably not do it justice. And that just proves that these guys know what they're doing when it comes to sound. So when it comes to recommending songs for this band, I'll do it in this order. We're going to start with 3, and then if you like it from there, we'll do another 3 set of songs. And then if you like it from there, I'll tell you a couple albums you should probably listen to. So the first big 3 songs I would recommend listening to would be Stuck on You, Saturday Savior, and Undone. That's 2 songs from Fantastic Planet and 1 off of Magnified. And if you don't like any of those songs, do not continue. If you do like those songs, here's what you continue to. The Nurse Who Loved Me, Wonderful Life, and probably Bernie. Wonderful Life has more of the Kurt Cobain style, like Nirvana style song. as Bernie has more of the creepy, eerie, maybe nu metal sound with no heavy acoustics, and The Nurse Who Loved Me is this ballad type song that a lot of people love. Also, a song that I would throw in there is the cover of Enjoy the Silence, which is actually really damn good. I think members of Depeche Mode even said that they've even kind of liked that version more than their own. So that's definitely a really heavy cover that's worth checking out. If you happen to like all of those songs, you should really give Fantastic Olive a try and Olive Magnified a try. Magnified is more of like a heavier grunge that's almost metal, while Fantastic Planet is more lighthearted and more into the space theme. But there's a little bit of like filler songs in between, so that's why it's kind of weird for me to recommend. As for the album Comfort, it's maybe worth a try. It's a little rough listening to, but don't try it if you don't like those first 6 or 7 songs. Now, as for their new stuff, personally, I would say the big ones would be Counterfeit Sky, Dark Speed, Distorted Fields, and one off of their new one would be Headstand. Now, on these newer tracks, you'll notice that the sound actually gets a little heavier, but also picks up the space sound that Fantastic Planet picks up on. And you'll notice the crazy guitar effects on some of these songs, especially Counterfeit Skies start off that way with just this crazy guitar wah sound. It's insane. Plus, these guys are so fluent and versatile when it comes to instruments that seeing them live, there was times where Greg would switch guitars with Ken, and like one would be the lead guitarist and then the other would be the bassist, or one would be the guitarist while the other one did piano. So it just proves that these guys are really just justified by a certain musician, but they're just all around music in general. So when you have people that are like that creating a band or writing their own music, it's almost like on paper it seems like it would not fail to make good music. I mean, after everything I just said, this just proves that you really don't get a whole lot of bands that are like this. I mean, even if they were famous, that does not make it to where the music is undeniably great. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that it just is the reason why I do videos, because them being kind of more underrated makes it that more special. Now, the next 2 bands I'm going to shine the light on are going to be a little bit more brief than I was with Failure, but I would put them around the same category as them. So the first one I'm going to talk about is a band called Hum. Now, Hum had been out there a little bit more back in the 90s with their big hit Stars back in 95. And that song was off of an album called You'd Prefer an Astronaut. Now, if you can't tell that this is space themed, I don't know what will. Aside from that, the band had only released one more album before calling it quits. That's making it only 3 albums from them, including their 1993 debut album, Electra 3000. From what I've heard, big factors from the breakup was a car accident delaying their shows, and their label didn't find a real hit to push them out on their last album, Downward is Heavenward. So practically the same thing as Failure. Here you have a great album, and the studio is just pretty much like, look, we need one hit. Nobody's going to listen to the whole album, probably. We just need one hit standout song, and it didn't happen. And just like that, they had a comeback around the same time as Failure did. And guess what else? They went on tour with them in 2015. What a hell of a lineup. That makes sense, right? And eventually releasing their album Inlet in 2020. But honestly, in reality, the song Stars and the album named You'd Prefer an Astronaut are really the only themes of space that really goes on with this band. But aside from that, it's pretty much in the same ballpark as the Deftones, with having that overdrive, heavy but slow melodic sound. So just like with Failure, the first set of songs that I would recommend would obviously be Stars, I Like Your Hair Long, and Why I Like Robins. This is all off of You'd Prefer an Astronaut. And if you like those, definitely give the whole album a try. That, and then basically you can take a step back to their Elektra 3000 debut album and try their songs Double Dip, Pinch and Roll, and Firehead. Now this album is a little bit more fast-paced and heavier, almost a little bit like Soundgarden's Super Unknown a little bit. But if you like those three, then you can go ahead and just say screw it and try their whole discography. I mean, there's really not a whole lot to go from. That including their album Downward is Heavenward. And I'm not gonna lie, the studio technically was not wrong about that album. There really is no stick out song to that album. It's that same sound that you get from Hum and from Failure, and Deftones especially. If you love that sound and you just need to sit there and relax, just give the whole album a go and just let it play. Like I said, you might get a song or two that are stick out tracks, but as far from that, it's just more of a tone from the album that's worth listening to rather than any particular songs in general. And I would technically say the same thing about their album Inlet. It's not too far sounding from their first three albums, which is, like I've said, just a weird coincidence to say the same thing about Failure. Now, did I think the album improved from their sound before? It's kind of plateaued, and it's not bad. It's good, but like I said, there's not a whole lot of stick out songs from that album. But like I've said, if you like Downward is Heavenward, it's a good album that's worth trying out from start to finish. And as for the last band I want to shine light on is a little gem of a band also from LA called Millie. I had discovered Millie from this random TikTok that had popped up on my For You page, out of all places, that doesn't sound too proudful to admit to. Now, I don't know if the post was from members or friends of members of the band, but this is pretty much what the video was.
Things in our Midwest emo house that just make sense.
And as soon as I heard that song, I was interested. Now in the video, it was described as emo, and that's how the lead singer Brendan Dyer, excuse me if I'm pronouncing that wrong, kind of describes the band's sound. But I kind of see it as that. I mean, I think it was mentioned that the vocals almost sounded a little bit like Hawthorne Heights, which I would agree with. It's not as up-paced and fast like Hawthorne Heights, but the whole sound and energy of the band has more of the 90s alternative that I would put in this category of the slow, heavy grunge like Failure, Deftones, and Hum. And because they capture that sound, I felt the need to cherish this band because this is a new and up-and-coming band. They just had a tour that went through the US this year, and I was a little bummed they didn't come to Michigan, but that is something I completely understand as a smaller band. But I felt the need to cherish the band anyways, so I had bought their vinyl. The album is weirdly called Our First Songs Plus Wish Goes On because it's actually sort of a compilation album of two EPs released earlier of those same names combined together to make one full album. And these were just made of singles that they've had over the years. So, not only does their sound kind of blend in with this theme, but here it is with the space themes of some of the lyrics that are in these songs. I mean, one of their biggest songs that I'm into is Star Thistle Blossom, which is already that right there. And not to mention they have another song called Denial where the chorus is said that galaxies wish you well. So, I thought perfect. It's the space theme we were thinking of. So as for song recommendation, there's really not a whole lot to go by because there's not a whole lot that the band is offering, but they are still working their way. I think their first single was only in 2019, So both those EPs were just a series of singles that they had made over the years to finally make up an entire album out of. However, that's not a bad thing, because they are, like I've said, going on tour, and they've been recently been releasing some new singles, and not only that, expecting to release a new album in September called Eternal Ring. So, to decide whether you are into this band or not, the few songs I would say to recommend to listen to and give a try first would be their song Star Thistle Blossom, Denial, Talking Secret, and their most recent single, Illuminate. This gives you a nice variety to what the band has to offer. Here with Star Thistle Blossom and Denial, you get a sound of their relaxing music that's kind of more soothing and peaceful, but then with Talking Secret and Illuminate, you get a little more of their heavier, eerie side that Failure really has to offer, in case you like that. And if you like those 4 songs, well, just give the rest of their songs a try. I mean, like I said, there's not a whole lot to go by, but that makes it short and sweet. So that's all I have for you today, guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment down below. Did you like these bands? Have you gave these bands a try? Have you heard of them before? Or did you hate them? Is there any other bands that are like this that I should know about? Or is there any bands in general that you feel like need shining light onto that other people should know about? If not, how about things in general? Movies, video games, it does not matter. I think there's so many great things in the world that get buried by just so much stuff that, you know, one person will tell me one thing like, oh, you should give this a try. And that's what's amazing. That's what this whole Shining the Light On series is really about. You know, it never hurts to try something new, because you'll never know if you'll like it. And if you need a good podcast to listen to, feel free to check out SuperNormal. The host of it, Matt McNamara, is actually a good friend of mine and had me on the show a couple times. Feel free to find their Facebook page so that way you can find a link to where you can watch them. And trust me, these guys are hilarious. And with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will definitely catch you guys next time.